wanted to talk about a few things that was very important. You know, this is just a really hard topic because I don't know what the heck's going on. I have reason to believe that these gunshot wounds were not real, and I don't know what the psychologist is, but you know, um, there's a huge brainstorm of things that goes on, and I think because there's so much information and nothing has ever been told to me directly, that I didn't find out what had happened until I put all the clues together, and I said, that's why that person was doing this. That's why this person was attacking me about my dead sister. And this is why they were attacking me. This team, were attacking me because, who got raped. Oh, that's why they made the president, attacking me again. So I had no idea what any of this stuff was going on, what reason, the population. So, when it comes to like Kasie Rickels, who died, and I spoke to her, was it once when I was in Washington D.C., and then once when I was at the Red Roof Inn Hotel, right before I went to eat at a Chinese restaurant with my brother, with my uncle Beto at a buffet, and there was some kind of really bad stuff that was going on. There's some things that I'd like to say, because sometimes if I think it's like, well, these gunshots, did Kasie really die? But that funeral process, I mean, the husband was crying, her son, I don't know nowadays, because there's so much computerized stuff that's going on that I've seen, even in other videos, that is so insanely real. Like, I've seen, like, just even when it says AI on there and just showing you what they're capable of doing, it looks so authentically real, you can't even separate the reality of what's fake and real anymore. Like, it's just fooling everyone. I mean, it is nearly impossible to be able to see what is real and what's not. And so what that does is that whatever I see on the internet, much of it can be, fooling to me when it comes to what I think is real, including, things like whenever I went to the hospital and I saw, Bruce Miron, who died, and when I went there, Michael Rossiter wanted to fight me inside the hospital room, inside where he was laying there in a coma, and his wife was kind of eye gouging me, giving me these looks of eye gouging, like just nasty. And the fact is that all the conversations that were held, and I saw Bruce breathing in a way that, and like almost fidgeting, like he was fighting to not break posture. And it's really just crazy to me, that, Bruce died 10 years ago. I haven't heard, and so there's all these numbers of things. Ginger Johnson, how she's posting video. She posts videos of Ted Cruz on her Facebook. She would not have posted anything on politics when I went to go talk to Michaela, my sister, who was sitting at the front desk, which I didn't know was at the time, and walking to Ted Cruz's office, the government office, and Ginger Johnson saying something mean about Ted Cruz, the governor. And I don't know at the governor at the time. I think they change governors in all the offices every 4 years. I think, and he's a senator now, which I don't even know if a governor, I thought the governor's more powerful than a senator. I don't even know how that works. So, it's very, very, very unsettling, to say the least. But I try not to put my mind onto that, because I have too much bad things that are going on that I can't really focus on any of that. I'm just trying to, at this point, like, keep my existence at 42 years old in the reality about what's going on, and just focus on that, because I really can't fix any of these things. I can't. Like, me telling you this information, you're not really going to fix much, other than most likely just harm me again with psychological bullshit, trying to then say you're healing it, and I don't necessarily believe that. But there's been such evil and such darkness that it's impossible to even think that to try to fix. You can only accept what has happened. That's, if you want to call that fixing. But you know, and you know, people are getting off the hook. You know, and you know, I haven't seen a heterosexual female in like fucking 10 years and shit, or not 10 years, but feels like it's probably been 7 years for me to look into the eyes of a real female, attractive female, either my age or younger, in any way, you know, and it's been so wild to me. But, you know, even if it's just in conversation, is what's been so bothering. Just, you know, just in conversation. Like, you walk to a store, you see a real heterosexual attractive female, not just like super attractive, just like working in like a normal conversation. This is not me hitting on them or something. Like, just a conversation, like for a minute, and that's it. None whatsoever existence for so many years. Like, I'm in a prison. And one of the things I want to say is, like, I thought of well, not one of the things, but several things I want to talk about, like, you know, like when I saw Ken Cooper's impressions and Sarah Cooper, like they got two people that look like Sarah Cooper and Ken Cooper at the Bruce Miron's funeral, and they were sitting there at the funeral where Bruce Miron was. And what my understanding of all the platforms and stage performances that they do is they'll get somebody to look like somebody and behave like somebody, and I'll somehow interpret that an ingestion. So what they do is they act in very subtle, small visual, physical impressions to me, and just like that. But they won't actually talk to them. And what it does to the brain and to the experience of that person is that it chisels away and saws away the troubles and harm that has happened, so that whenever there's a renewing process, there won't be nothing for you to grip onto when you stay angry and frustrated to what evil has been directed at me. So it's justifying their actions and neutralizing me. And it's very unfair, because I didn't do anything. I'm suffering not just because of the situation, but I have to suffer punishment for something I didn't cause and do, entirely because of someone else. And I didn't do anything. And I have to live my life never happy, you know, very rarely smiling, not able to laugh, very scared to laugh, or very scared to joke because of the environment and psychological shit and the electronic devices that they beat me with. But I try to maintain and not focus on, you know, much of anything else, just to try to keep things what I'm supposed to do and what I can do. Get a better education, try to share some love and kindness while I'm alive, and try to listen to people when I can, and try to protect myself when I can. But it is sometimes feels nearly impossible, and impossible in some cases, because the chaos, the electronic devices are just, they misfire and they do all kinds of fucked up shit to you. It's just like, it does really PTSD to you in a way that, like my brother Frankie, who got molested and raped so many times, when people weren't around and molesting him, is where the trauma began to boil in on him. And then it started to affect him in deep, bad, horrific ways, so that even when people weren't around and think that things weren't normal, they weren't normal. And he ended up enduring that pain. But it wasn't the rape experience, it was the after effect. And it was all these situations. So when he goes and gets something to eat, he acts hesitant. You know, or can I touch this? Can I grab that? Can I have that? And so all these hesitations and things are happening to him, and that's where the trauma begins to happen. And the molding of the character of the individual. And so it's kind of like that. But, you know, like when I think of Kasie Rickels, who passed away, I think to myself on the clues, it seems, and I try not to staple the clues, because I could be wrong on these fucking clues, okay? But I'm pretty solid on most of it. But, you know, this is like kind of, you know, just drawing it on the dry erase board and kind of brainstorming of it every once in a while. And I think if Kasie really didn't die, if Rickels did pass away, the reason that she had passed away would also be another technique to alleviate or heal something that I don't know of. And I thought, when I was with Kasie, it was very weird with me and Kasie Rickels because she's very attractive. She's a very attractive, and I was extremely attracted to her, but I always saw her as a friend. I don't know why. It wasn't like ever me like luring and trying to figure out how I was going to, because I was around her all the time. I was around Brian Yockey. I grew up with her. I was around Daniel Box with her. They used to come to my apartment. It was always like I don't know how to, it was like a friend. She was like a friend, like I always saw her like a trusted good friend. Like I could go like a friend. It was very attracted to her, but it was like a friend, and I always saw her that way because she was in a relationship with my friends. And I had already made the mistake before when I was younger by sleeping with one of my friend's girlfriends, which I didn't know was his girlfriend because he was gay, and then it affected me. But I knew she was attracted to me as well. But one of the things that, with the circumstances, I thought, which had nothing to do with me and her or friends, is I thought, I wonder if someone else wanted her and then got to her somehow, some way, and they wanted me out of the picture. And in order to put me out of the picture, they would have hired Ginger and paid Ginger to this sleep with me, which she's no longer alive because she passed away from cancer. And I hate to be thinking of these things, but you know, there's a lot of clues to that could have been possible. And one of the ways that I think is that I went to Jane Box's house and I dropped off a package for a couple of friends, a model and some religious postcards. And I noticed that James Box, who's very old now, opened the door, and he seemed very healthy, and he looked over at the house. And many years ago, I was 27 years old, and Ricky Box, who was a friend of mine, pulled out a shotgun. He walked out of the house, and he was like gonna plan to shoot one of the guys way down the street at the corner. And I don't know what. And I just showed up. I don't know. He called me out of nowhere, and he was like, "Hey man, why don't you come over? There's some problems going on with my neighbor. I don't know if you want to come over, man. These guys started shit." And I went over to just give support, see what's going on. I didn't know he had a gun. And I drive by the apartment of the house where Joe used to live. Joe Fabrielli, or I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, but we know him as Tall Joe. Tall Joe, or we know him as Joe, right? Chris Martinez's friend. We know him. They used to live at that house with his mother many years, and they used to be like big party houses there. Well, anyway, they moved out many years ago, but there were some Mexican people that lived there. When I drove by, there was a crowd of people. There was like 15 of them on the front yard. Maybe not 15, I'd say anywhere from 12 to 8 people just on the front yard. And there was one guy that I remember seeing right by the door on the hallway when you walk. And I remember what this guy looked like. And a couple of guys, and it looked like I also saw Richard Martinez, the guy that I saw at Richland College whenever I got raped by the transgender. And then I talked about, I put it on video, and I went to Ricky's. Well, anyway, that situation got over with, right? It all ended. But I went to Ricky's dad's house, James Box's house, which is Ricky's house. Daniel Box's house, his dad's house, where they grew up. I used to go there all the time growing up. Spent the night there hundreds of times. And I dropped off the packages, and I noticed that James looked over at that house, and he goes, and I thought, and I don't know what to think of it. And I thought, what is with that house that's connected to something? I don't know. And I don't know. So I believe that someone at that house, or somehow that house is connected, somehow maybe wanted or did something to Kasie. Either, I don't know if it was a bad thing. Maybe she chose to get into that relationship. Because remember, if you get enough people in the crowd, you can corner a female to then sleep with a person. And you can do that. You corner people and put people in bad circumstances. And I think that's something that could have happened. But I don't know anything about this. To this day, it's totally just blank to me. I'm not aware of any relationship. I knew quite a bit of number of guys that always wanted to be with Kasie. A large number of them. One of them being like this guy that ended up going to become a Marine. His name was like Chris. And he was always talking about he loved her so much. He told me all the time how much he loved her toward me. I mean, like all the time. I don't know why he told me this, but he always told me how much he loved her and how much he loved her and this and that. He loved her. And I was like, well, that's great, man. You should, get together, maybe talk to her. Maybe she'll give you a chance. And this is what I would tell this guy. And he's like a white blonde. He's like a white guy, like a white Marine picture guy you see in the Marine Corps and shit. I'm like, yeah, maybe she'll give you a chance, You should, take her out and see how, talk to her and see how she feels about you, man. Like, I'm telling this guy this, right? And I've known Kasie way longer than any of these guys. But anyway, there were a few people that pushed me away from Kasie and were very manipulative, and that was Chris Martinez. Chris Martinez did that with Kasie, like he did that with Susie toward me. Like, he always wanted to fish out who gets the gays are always fishing out who gets selling the females a lot of the times. And a lot of the times when I came in certain situations, they always saw me as like a pathetic little man, and so they would do little spickle shit toward me to try to verbally put me down like a coward, so that you wouldn't feel the confidence or willpower or demeanor to talk to a girl and feel like you're a man, or feel like, this belongs to me, or like a man is supposed to be what a woman wants. All the facets of what women are attracted to. So Chris Martinez did that a few times, and I noticed that, and I picked up on it right away, and he doesn't even know who the fuck Kasie was. So, I never said anything, because to me it was like, I knew if things weren't a flying color, if things weren't as dramatic of evidence about what their behavior was, they had no idea how long I'd actually known Kasie, that I worked with Kasie. She was my manager. Like, she was very responsible and all these things. And I always felt bad. I really, in my personal opinion, I always felt very bad, because I always felt the people she was around were horrible monsters. And I knew that if she ever was in my arms, that she would have been able to be unbelievably successful and really well equipped. But unfortunately, the people around her started to milk her and abuse the shit out of her, and I didn't like it, but I couldn't do anything. One reason was because a lot of the people were racist, and they always felt that even when they were gay, they were racist. They wanted just to use her. Used to what they didn't want to get a full-time job and then just take her money. And I hated the shit. And I was such in vulnerable situations because things were not going to be good. And I had to keep myself safe, but you got to remember to let the female make her own choices. And she has her own choices to make, to respect that. So I know nothing of that. And I think to myself, I wonder if the reason that something like that could have happened is because, I don't know, because all them guys at that house, they were all Mexican, and one of them charged at me. He was this big old fucking meaty guy with a mohawk. I mean, this guy was fucking meaty. I mean, like, this guy was like a few inches shorter than me. Like, he was like 5'8", but he was like 350 pounds, but like not fat, like not just fat, but like bulk, like a power man or whatever you see on TV lifting fucking cars and shit. And he was running at me, and the way he ran at me was like a fucking rhino. Like a fucking rhino. I'm not even kidding. This dude was like built like a fucking rhino. Like fucking fat head, fat body, I mean just giant. And anyway, but that was over with. Last year, I think was it a year ago? Yeah, I think it was a year ago that I worked over at this Mexican grocery store. And when I worked there was a Mexican guy. This Mexican guy was starting a lot of shit toward me. And I didn't notice when I was working there, but this Mexican guy is the same fucking guy that was standing in front of that house. When I drove by, and they looked like they were all looking for trouble. That Mexican guy, short Mexican guy, looked like he was standing right in front of the door, and he looked right over at me, like when I was in the car, like they didn't like the fact or thought that Ricky was asking me for his support, and they were all Mexican, and Ricky's white, and I was there to support Ricky, not them. And so I could tell by looking at them, and so I was trying to build a bridge so that, hey, calm down, like, since I'm Mexican, just chill the fuck off of him, you know, like, and it didn't really work that way. Ricky went to go get a gun or some shit, and I don't know what the fuck, but I don't know the story to that. I don't know anything to this day. Is completely clueless. You know, I knew without a doubt that, you know, Kasie had some of the worst, really bad monsters, really fucking bad people. And I know it was because they always claimed to be protective over her, and they weren't, in my opinion. You know, because Kasie knew I was DJing, Kasie would see me work out, you know, she knew I was getting fit, I took care of myself, she came to my apartment, how clean I was, and how sort of organized I was, and how my demeanors and whatnot. And, she was open to me about a lot of situations, you know, but like I said, throughout the years, and so it does make me question at times, and I'm like, because I don't even know, you know, sometimes a lot of people will go after the wrong person thinking that they had something to do with it, or it was going to clear their slate for what they wanted, just like Kenneth did, and just like so many other people did. And I had nothing to do with it. I was literally not in the picture, and they came after me for it. I had nothing to do with it, and they just wanted her, and they thought maybe she liked me, and I was preventing it. But I don't know what anything had to do. I had nothing to do with it at all. Like, in fact, I wasn't even associated with Kasie. I'd see her every once in a while here and there. Anyway, I thought I'd make a video on this. You know, there's all these suspicious things that kind of go on, and you know, but there's nothing that I can do. It's very sad. I don't like it at all. You know, I cannot fix any of these circumstances. You know, and there's all these ants that are all over the fucking place. But yeah, you know, there's all these suspicious stuff that goes on, but I try not to think about it because there's just too much chaos. It's way too much chaos. Like, here's another situation. Many years ago, right before this murder attempt happened to me, I lived at this house, and it was a tattoo artist, and it was right near my mother's house, right close to my mother's house. And I remember my mother's twin picking me up, thinking it was my mother, and it wasn't. And it was my mother's identical triplet. And I remember her dropping me off, and there was two guys there. One guy told me he died and had to be resuscitated, and he was an electrician. Another one was a tattoo artist, and there was a few people coming in to get tattoos every once in a while. And I lived there for probably a couple months, I think it was, and it was kind of a pretty ghetto house. And I remember there was a guy, very lengthy, real skinny, but real lengthy tall, like skinny, lengthy tall, like 6'3", 6'4", but real skinny, like scrawny skinny. Not like a disease, like he just had really good, strong genetics. And he stayed there for about 3 days, I think it was. And I was talking to him, and he told me, he goes, and he was real cool. And you know his body shape, you know what it reminded me of? His body shape reminded me of that famous porn star that had slept with so many girls, and he also slept with Michaela, my sister, in a porn video, which would look like, it was Michaela without a doubt, and it looked like her. It was Michaela without a doubt. It was 100% her, and I had no idea, and it was that guy. But there's so much AI, there's so much fucking computers, I don't know if somebody replaced her face and body, or his, but it was that guy for sure, right? But anyway, this guy came into this house, and I was about 33 years old. This is like 10 years ago. This is like 12 years. I was about 30 years old, 31 years old. And it was the last house, one of the last houses I ever lived at before I murder in Dallas ever again, you know, for many, many years. And he comes in, I'm talking to him, and he tells me something, and he says, he goes, yeah, I went up to Wisconsin. This is how he tells me. He goes, yeah, I went up to Wisconsin. And he goes, Wisconsin, it's really cold there? He goes, yeah. And he's just kind of like thinking, like he's trying to map out something, but like he's trying to figure, but it's not against me. It's almost like he's just trying to figure something out, like some clues or something, that's something else is going on. And he goes, I go, you got any brothers and sisters? He goes, yeah, I got one sister. And I asked him, he goes, yeah, I only grew up with I only grew up with two brothers. I don't got any sisters that I'm aware of. I'm almost gonna say she's way older than me, half sister, but not even. I'm not associated with them. I only grew up with two brothers. And he looks at me and he goes, "You only got two brothers? You don't got a sister?" And he said something like this because he told me, and he said, "Yeah, I got one sister." He goes, "Yeah, I just got a sister." And the reason he says this is because he knows that I feel that he was talking about Michaela. So I don't know if this guy could have been a hero. He could have maybe been on the lookout, because in the world of pornography and in the world of victimizing people, you're never going to be able to track them down. And a lot of the times, a lot of the times you won't be able to use homosexuals and gays to try to think you're protecting the girl, because that's not the way that's going to work. You have to have a straight guy to go enter a circle of nothing but other straight men that are doing the going after the girls. And so that way you'll have someone on a protected defense, not just claiming that the homosexuals are the ones that protected her and did all this other shit, and that's not the way that it works. And so I don't know what the circumstances was to this, but because I saw this guy. This guy's big. This guy's like 6'4", 6'5". I mean, he's like 6'4", maybe 6'5". But he's like 6'4", and I saw him at the porn convention when I saw a couple of the other, I saw Haley Spades, I saw, Maddie Collins, and everything that goes on. And so he looked pretty strained when I saw him. It didn't look like he was dressed very well. He looked like he was just kind of strained and pretty bad, like something bad had happened with himself and what he had done or something. And he was just by himself, and he was like moisture, sweat, kind of anxiety. And I didn't say anything, and I already made videos about this, but it brings clues to what might happen. Also with what had happened with me being raped, because given the idea that you have Patricia Gaidina, a transgender that had a sex change and was possibly infected with the HIV virus, that what happens is this person had to come in contact with the absolute worst of people, and with that intention. And I'll never know what that story is. But if it's ever unrevealed. But I do know that one day I was watching this prison video of this guy that said he spent 20 years in prison, and he looked exactly like this porn star. Like, this guy could have been a brother, like, of this guy, of the porn star that tall guy. And I saw this guy one time over at the Carroll Trinity Mill station one day. He was riding the bus, and I saw him. I didn't say anything. I was like, damn, that guy looks exactly like the guy that, everybody masturbates to and envisions themselves to be, right? He's the guy. He's really the guy that does it. And, and let me tell you, this guy didn't look like he was performing. He didn't do, like, professional videos necessarily. The videos that he was making looked like kind of skimpy videos. It did not look like, these high company brand names. And, like, he looked broke. It didn't look like he had any money. And looked like he was doing this, like, for very, very low amounts of money. And what happened was, I was watching this guy, and he talked about being released from prison, and he spent 20 or 25 years. And he was a first-time offender, and he talked about, and he says, well, yeah, he goes, me and a couple of guys, well, we kidnapped this guy, this black guy that pissed us off, and, you know, he was racially motivated. We kidnapped him and we tortured him, you know, beat him up and tied him up, and he was a first-time offender, and he was a hate crime, and he was like 19 or 20. He was like 18, I think, or 20 years old. No older than 20. And he's like 18 or 19, and then he got caught, and they got all arrested, and he goes and he says, they threw the book at me. He goes, I was the first-time offender. For that, they mandatory gave me 20 years minimum. I spent 20 years in prison for that. And the guy lived. They tortured the guy, but it wasn't like no cartel torture. It wasn't like cutting off fingers and shit. But it was kidnapping, holding hostage, all kinds of charges and shit. He was a first-time offender. And the way that he talked about it kind of made me think of the porn star of this guy. Because remember, you think that this guy's a monster, or a lot of people want to blame this guy, and then what it would be is you have other people do it. So you would have other straight guys or other gay guys that sell it to that guy. Because he does it, but he doesn't know what he's doing. He's kind of like the guy that goes to the Marine fields and starts shooting people and killing them, and not actually understanding what so much of the story is. He's just a guy that does it. And he doesn't get to told the details of it. He doesn't get told all the details of it. They just need the poison, and they just use it to victimize him that way. And this guy talks about, and he says in his video, and the way that he says, he goes, yeah, and he's looking down, and he goes, yeah. He goes, they threw that one at me. He goes, they threw that one at me. And he talks about, then they threw this one at me. And he talks about, he says it in a way that he says that, like, girls or specific type of girls were specifically targeted and thrown to him like that to make a porn video or to fuck them. Like they were just thrown to him as like a sort of chess tactical way to whatever political or movement that these people were trying to make, whatever reason it was. Whether it was to make leverage for something, to steal this popularity, to make a signal to the president, whatever it was that for that rare reason. It wasn't for any other reason. It was it was for some sort of thing that was negative or harm. And I thought, I wonder, what that story was to that. But I remember that very specifically because Haley Spades, she went to Good Elementary, and the way that I knew her is I remember seeing her way down the hall, like far, far down, and I remember her smile, and I remember just looking, and I was like, God, that girl is beautiful. That girl is so pretty. That girl was just precious, and she was so happy and bright. And I noticed how the teacher sort of carried her as a throne, but I remember thinking, she's too young for me. She's like, yeah, she's too young, but I said, wow, that girl is really pretty. And that was it. And she went to Good Elementary, and it was, or at least I think, maybe it wasn't her, maybe it looked like somebody other, but I want to say it was. And I talked about that she lived just down the street, on the other side of the street, and all kinds of shit. But anyway, I thought I would say something about this to whoever the psychologists are and whoever's mapping everything out. At 42 years old, there's nothing that can be done. Whatever harm and injustice, I don't believe, will never happen. And unfortunately, I come from a mother that is very loving, that is a poor little Mexican lady that sells like tamales on a corner of a 100-degree temperature street, just trying to feed her little puppies and dogs, and just very, very nice, and just lives a very humble, nice life. And she has no education, know how to read, has had a horrific life of torture, of being raped and sold for sex, abused and abused again. And the people that showed up into the picture took entire advantage of that, and it's gone. And that will never be fixed. And the torture of that experience still lives in me. I have to practice Jesus and pray to help me get through the day, because because of how unfair and how evil the perpetrators had prepared this. With distant family members, Kenneth Cooper, there's very different types of victims that did this. There was no fixing, and the leaders and everyone justified their actions and are going to. There's no more voice for that. So, yeah, I think that unfortunate how those. It's not just unfortunate. It's a tragedy, because even when the evidence was placed on their table, they didn't care. There was no justice. They just choose who they want to feel sorry for, and it was horrific. It was out of pure envy, jealousy, and ego. Pure evil. I mean, throwing the little kid to get raped, and I'm going to be successful, and all my team's going to make me look successful, and you're going to suffer with your own existence here on Earth. But I gutted you out like a worthless pig because I'm the real man, and I'm the real hero, and I got away with it because you're going to find out how stupid your mother was, and how better and smarter this side was. And that's the way that it happened and was. By the time I tried to put him in any defense, it was too late. They had my mother under control of the psychologist, because like a psychologist and started to poison my mother, and it was just lost. They did. There was nothing. And when they got unraveled, there was no justice. I also made it even more worse. They made the monsters heroes, and they just changed the fucking story because they knew they could get away with it. And these are very serious crimes, very horrific amount of suffering that was literally directed and happened at me and my immediate family, yet it ended up being somebody else's golden treasures in front of everybody. And but I thought I'd make a video on this, hoping for the best, that whatever it is, there's a couple of other situations that came across. I talked about Kasie, I talked about numbers of things. Who else? Ginger Johnson, which I believe her real name was Laura, Lauren. I don't know how many other people are involved, but I know there's some really bad monsters. There's some really I don't know how to explain. For those, it's hard to explain. It's hard to even express the ability that someone is using an electronic device to control me mentally, diffuse me, ability to think clear, or stutter across words, shit on command, piss on command, shooting things that make a muscle tissue twitch, all kinds of crazy things. And not one friend I had said, "What the fuck are you doing to my friend? What are you torturing me with?" No, none of them gave a damn about my life. They just gave a damn about what they were going to get. They didn't care about, tell me more, who's doing this to you? Because they may do it to me as well. Didn't care. None of them did. Not one. And you find out, at least in how worthless my life really is to these people. And I'm not talking about the friends and people that I knew, but the people that were shooting this, and the political power, Barack Obama, and the movement of who was shooting these and setting up these electronic devices to beat the fuck out of me. How worthless and disposable my life is, just like trash. Just like trash, just like this homeless guy, this trash. I had somebody else that died just like trash. And they don't care about whatever, this is getting the attention, well, they'll kill him. They don't care. There was also one other thing, there was also another thing that I thought. I was thinking that maybe I don't think that Patricia Gadina died. I don't think this person is alive anymore. But I don't think that this person passed away necessarily from a transplant. I mean, not a transplant, from a sex change. I think Patricia Gadina is a possibility. I know it sounds weird, but I don't know. I remember thinking that when I saw this person. I don't know why. But I thought she had brain cancer. This person had brain cancer and didn't know, or something, had some sort of brain cancer. But I don't know. I don't know what the circumstance. It's wherever the police officers were in the public. I mean, there's no hope. it goes every which way and every lie, made up story that they want. And I didn't have a voice in it, but even though I was the victim. I mean, if you look at those people that go to prison for outrageous amounts of years, it's how worthless your life is to the public and the police officers. It's completely worthless. It dispose you for what they want, and especially since the situation that I actually hold that can have a tremendous amount of influence, and they'll neutralize it and infect it with a disease, and that's what they did. And wouldn't let me have my own career in the medical field. I did everything to prevent it. Yeah, I thought I'd make a video on that. There's all these fucking ants all over the fucking place. And anyway, and it's hard to believe you have all these people and all this circumstances. Everybody's getting old. You know, you don't know how much longer these people that did drugs, and it's so unfair at the magnitude, because you don't know how fucking lazy or how scavenging some of these motherfuckers were, and they don't want to hear my story on how I saw things and dealt with to protect myself. But I was not gonna go die in some fucking field for your fucking golden rubies, for fucking worthless shit, and when I was treated like garbage. And that's exactly what ended up happening, and still going to end up happening later down the road. But you know, there's just a number of things. Sometimes I think to myself, like, is my grandma still alive? You know, like, because I think to myself, like, whenever I'm going to say I know this is illegal. Like, when I went to the cemetery, my dad's tombstone with my mother's twin, and we went to go look at my grandma's tombstone. There are you cannot put two grave tombstones one on top of the other. At best, you can put them next to each other, but you can't put one on top of the other. And I've never even seen ever in my life where my uncle made his own burial plot and he set it in stone, and it has his name and everything. It just doesn't have his mark of date of death. And my grandma is buried there with the day she was born, the day that she died, with her name and picture. And all I'm thinking to myself is, like, there isn't one tombstone in this entire area that's like that I saw, that I could remember, or any funeral place I've ever saw. That raises a lot of question, the authenticity of who's telling me the truth and who's not. But I have a pretty good I've always had a good solid idea. I mean, it was all made up in lies of what they did. They want to put this person in charge. They'll build the credibility and change the story, completely haywire it, completely toxic and poison, to make it look like a fairy tale, or make it look like just an exceptional story, and it's not. It was just to get away with whatever the fuck they want, because the President of the United States, Barack Obama, was involved. I met Michael Jackson when I was a kid. There were so many rapes. My mother was being raped. There's a dead little child that didn't get a proper burial. There was money, all this money that was stolen, and we were just like wetbacks that were uneducated and stupid in a broken family, and they're the ones that fixed it. And they're the ones, the heroes, and all this other shit. So, anyway, I thought I'd make a video. Hopefully this kind of clears whatever it is up. So, but I don't know. I saw that guy over at the grocery store. I was working with him for a day. And when I remember I talked about that I was sitting and putting all these vegetables, and I felt somebody shoot me in my face with an electronic device, and he said something, he goes, "No llores," and then bam, I felt like somebody shoot me in my face. And he started talking real nasty and crazy, like he had a police officer badge himself. So I don't know who's sending him, I don't know who placed him there, I don't know who sent the electronic devices, but there's not much I can do. They have my mother under control, 100%, top to bottom. Nobody cares. whatever story they want.